Hello and welcome to Mandibil. Welcome back to my deconstruction series on Keith Frankish's lectures on the case against qualia, or rather, um, what's the general title? Um, Illusionism. Sorry, it's been a little while. No, I had a 4 or 5 days a couple of weeks ago where I had a cold, and then I've been sort of in a combination of vacation and working mode, you could say. I wouldn't say that exactly, but something looked like when I was not at work, I was having a kind of vacation, taking time off to have fun, and so I haven't been busy doing this stuff, right? But I thought I have a half a day off here to get back into my habits of deconstructing this. It might take a couple of years to get through it, so I might want to do something about it, right? And we got around as far as I know, the 21-minute mark, something like that, ending his points on heterophenomenology. And always it's just a hint, right? Whenever people sort of, okay, there's a new word here. I haven't heard about heterophenomenology, right? When people try to throw words at you and new combinations of words, so hetero and phenomenology, be careful, because there's a tendency that people just put new labels or old wine on new bottles, right? They take something that has been sort of talked about before, then they give it a new label as if they, by this new label, I mean, I'm not saying it's possible that there is some new philosophy in it, but it's very likely that it's just a new label for something that has already been discussed before and labeled before, maybe not in that fashion, but combining things like hetero and phenomenology and sort of indicating and make you believe that there's actually some new thinking here. But it's just the old stuff with a new label on it, right? Or a couple of old stuffs with a new label on it. Um, and it reeks of bad philosophy, this, right? Because when you try to deconstruct what he says, I can't find a red thread in it, right? It might be there, but it's hard to see it, right? And it doesn't help him creating new words. In fact, it's a pointer that something doesn't work. If you have to come up with new terms and throw a new term at your philosophy and say, well, now I have explained something, right? That's not how it works. It's just bad philosophy, in my opinion, right? But and this heterophenomenology, I don't get what it was about, right? And I had a lot of criticism in my last part discussing this, and I can't get my head around it, and I really don't want to, because I feel I'm being manipulated, both being manipulated, but also I'm aware that he's working from a fundamental paradox, a bad kind of logic. Maybe you couldn't even say it's logic. It's it's a bad understanding of metaphysics, right? It's a bad foundation for starting thinking. He is working from a paradoxical understanding, and inevitably that is going to lead to bad philosophy. Of course it is, right? So no matter what kind of fancy words he throws at me, I'm not going to take it, right? I'm not saying that there might be some interesting stuff in what he's saying, but the overarching, the foundational stuff is fallacious or faulty, right? So, okay, we are going into some quine something. I don't remember exactly.
There's a good
But
description,
let's see what he says.
of the heterophenomenological method in Dennett's book Consciousness Explained, chapter 4. Okay, so that's all by way of preliminaries. Let's now actually get into some of Dennett's arguments against qualia. We're going to begin with his paper Quining Qualia from 19 88. Quining here is a little joke. The verb quine is a jokey verb, meaning to deny the existence of something that obviously does exist. It's from the philosopher Willard Quine, who famously denied the existence of an analytic synthetic distinction, something that all philosophers had previously thought obviously did exist. Okay, so Dennett is going to quine qualia. And the paper consists of a large number of intuition pumps, thought experiments, and we're going to look at just 3 of them here.
It's also, I don't mind if I make sort of a title for one of my videos, being a little, artistic in my choice of words, and there could be a pun in there or double meaning or something. Yeah, fine. It's when it's a title for a video. But when I explain my fundamental philosophy, I really want it to be strict and clear, and I don't want any puns or any jokes or anything that is sort of funny about. That's out of place in my opinion, right? And when Dennett, apparently in 1988, quining qualia, it's like it's just a wordplay. Look how funny this sounds, right? To me, that's the same as saying he doesn't really take this seriously, right? He doesn't take himself seriously. He's just this sort of, I don't know what words to put on it, but it just, it's just a little hint that this is just a, academic make work kind of stuff, right? As an academic, I have to write stuff so I can keep on being an academic, but because I wouldn't want to go out and work in the real world where people have to work on night shifts and work on machines and all that stuff. No. Let me be in here in academia so I can get away from reality, right? That's the sort of the basic stuff. Don't underestimate. Don't don't let people's words and their sophist expression and the way they come across and what their beard looks like or what their clothes look like and their fancy glass, all this stuff that they sort of throw at you. Just get it out of the way and get to the core of what is being talked about, right? Don't be led astray by, how people come across. Everybody's trying to make you believe something, right? At least a lot of people are, right? Just trying to remove all the fluff and get to the core of it, right? and when people are sort of half joking, they're half sort of derailing you, right? But keeping you interested by keeping your sort of what is he talking about, right? But if you're not trying very hard to be very precise in the words you use, you will have to deduce that people are trying to manipulate you some way or another to a smaller or a larger extent, right? When you are creative or artistic with words, you're trying to manipulate somehow, right? You're not trying to be strict. You're not trying to be sort of scientific and precise or whatever you would call it, right? Making sure that making sure that the words you use gets people to the right understanding of what you're trying to say, right? If I met you on the street and you have never heard of Dennett or Frankish or qualia or anything, if I said to you, quining qualia, what would you say? You say, what the fuck are you talking about, right? You might also, if you're sort of completely ignorant, if I said, well, a discussion about metaphysics, right? Then you would say, okay, discussion about what's metaphysics. Well, yeah, it's what's behind, above physics, something like that. Well, what's that? That could be hard to explain. We are doing the sort of the deeper end of philosophy here, right? But quining qualia, that sort of nobody knows what the hell it's about. And it's also, so then you have to read what he's talking about because you don't know what the hell he's talking about. Quine, okay, there might be something about a person, and qualia, okay, I think it's about, experiences and whatever, what it's like to be a bat and whatever, right? It's just, I'm just riffing here, right?
The first one, Dennett calls alternative neurosurgery. So it goes like this. In the night, an evil neurosurgeon operates on you during your sleep.
What's an evil, right? What's an evil? Evil is about morality. I can't see it any other way. Well, it can't be an experience when you're talking about, qualia, right? What it's like to experience evil, right? What it's like? Well, then Hume will say, no, you can't do that, right? The is-ought problem. You can't experience evil. And if you can't experience it, how can you reference something as if it's knowledge of some neurosurgeon operating? What does it mean that you operate? If I come and stick a knife into your belly when you're sleeping, am I operating on you? Or am I, being, something else, right? And if you operate, are you then evil? Evil and operate, aren't they opposed to each other? Because you wouldn't say somebody sticking a knife in your back when you're walking down the street in that fancy city in Crete, right? You wouldn't call that an operation. You would call that murder or something like that, I would presume, right? So there's so much packed into some sentence. And this is what these sophists do, right? They just bring it in the back door and say it's an evil, and it's a neurosurgeon, it's operating, and it's during the night, right? And while you're sleeping, I think you said, well, how the hell do you know it then, right? How do you know about it then? You can't know about it. No, but you have this just a mind. No. It has to be something that can be handled in reality, right? You can't just make up sort of scenarios that are... Excuse me, I have something tickling my throat. It's also this kind of, trolley problem thing, right, where you all of a sudden have certain insights into things that are going to happen in the future and all sorts of stuff, right? And when you're talking about qualia, you are dealing with metaphysics, in my opinion, right? And evil is ethics. And if you're doing ethics, in my opinion, you have to establish metaphysics, you have to establish epistemology in order to get knowledge, which is something you have to base your objectivity on, right? And you need objectivity in order to agree with somebody on what is evil, right? You might discuss that, but at least you need to establish your metaphysics and your epistemology and your ethics, right? In order to talk about evil. So you can't talk about evil when you're doing metaphysics, because then it becomes a circular argument, right? It's ridiculous, right? These people have no fucking clue what they're talking about. They are not sufficiently trained in basic philosophy. And then they want to lecture you about your experiences, right? Be very careful with people like this. Whenever people start to, discuss your experience and tell you how you should understand your experience, be careful, right? Listen to them, right? But be very skeptical. Be very doubtful, right? And when people start to tell you about you shouldn't take this experience serious, or you might not take that experience serious, or you should take that experience seriously, right? Then you should be very careful, right? Because they might lead you astray completely and you lose touch with good philosophy. I'm not saying you're going to, but be careful. The deeper you get to the foundations, the more careful you should be, because the deeper you get down, right? As he's doing here, he's talking about evil in metaphysics, right? You can't use that argument. So he's also mixing things around. Excuse me. And I just don't, I mean, be careful with these people, right?
When you wake up the next morning, the colours of things have switched round, or so it seems to you. Blue things look yellow, red things look green, and so on. So here you're Parrot Monty here.
But things that look green, look red, and sort of switched around. When you wake, the colors of things have switched. No one else reports a difference. But if you're alone on an island, there's nobody to report. Why are you so hung up on these reports? Because why are those? You don't know if they have been screwed with by some kind of neurosurgeon, right? So, I mean, and neurosurgeon, is that something that happens regularly? I mean, is that something I have to take up in insurance against neurosurgeons? It just doesn't happen. I know it's a thought experiment, right? And to some extent, okay, I can go with that. But it's just these, why do we have to make these weird examples, right? An old woman with a box with a beetle in it. Ugh. This sort of, who experiences that, right?
He looks turquoise and yellow instead of scarlet and blue as he used to look. Now, no one else seems to have noticed a difference in colours. Everyone else seems to think everything's just the same. So you conclude that the change has been in you. Something has happened to you. And you express this by saying, my qualia have inverted. Everything's still the same colour.
How can qualia invert? What's inversion? Is there a complementary colors? So a neurosurgeon can fiddle with your neurolinks, or what it's called, or your brain or whatever, and sort of make complementary colors out of it. It's just, why is that the case? Why is not the color next to it, or a few nanometers, whatever term you want to put on? Why is that the case? It's important that it's inverted, and I don't think inversion is a good term to use when you're talking about colors. But at least you could say, okay, he's saying inverted, but they are different from what they used to be. Okay, I can go with that.
Colours of things in the world are still the same, but these colours produce different mental qualities in me when I look at them.
When I look at what? I have to take that again.
I think everything's just the same. So you conclude that the change has been in you. Something has happened to you. And you express this by saying, my qualia have inverted. Everything's still the same color.
There's also one thing that you need to accept, that somebody can change your colors, right? Somebody can go into your mind and screw around, and then the colors invert. That's possible somehow. I mean, you can't just create something and say, you just have to accept that this is. I think that be careful with thought experiments that seems impossible to do in real life, right? Be very careful. Because why? Nobody can do that. I haven't heard about any neuroscience that can change colors in people's minds. You might be able to, hit yourself on the head and then you see fancy colors. Okay, but then you're just screwing around with your brain and making it dysfunctional. That's not. It's like taking psychedelia or something, whatever, right? It's just it's not because there's some different world or anything like that. It's just like there was another point I wanted to get to.
Colors of things in the world are still the same, but these colors produce different mental qualities in me when I look at them. So when I look at...
So they create different colors in me. So he apparently implicitly knows what's going out there, and he's saying, inside me, I have different colors than that out there. How does he know? How does he know about the out there if he needs the in there in order to have any idea what is going on out there? And if he knows what's going out there, why the hell does he need those experiences then? Then what does it matter what color that parrot is if he already knows what color it should be? Right? Just say, don't bother with experiences. Just leave all experiences alone. You already know what's out there, right? So it's just, and that's the paradox. He doesn't understand. He thinks he has access to two worlds, an inner world and an outside world, right? He thinks he has access to both. He doesn't understand the inherent problem in that kind of thinking.
At green things, I now have red qualia, and when I look at it.
And he's going to sort of elaborate on this and then try to convince you that whatever color there is in your mind is not important. It's the colors out there that are the real colors, right? Not the colors in there, inside you, right? Because we all know that that parrot should have that color and that color and that color because it says in the encyclopedia and whatever, right? No, bad metaphysics, right?
Yellow things, I now have blue qualia, and so on. My qualia have inverted. Or have they? Is that the only possibility? Well, then it points out it depends on what the evil neurosurgeon actually did. Now,
but you don't know that because you was asleep, right? You were asleep. You nobody will ever get to know what that neurosurgeon, that demon does, right? Because everybody is asleep when he's doing it, apparently, right? Otherwise, you have to also have an example when that neurosurgeon does it when you're not asleep or awake, right?
He might have tampered with the mechanisms that produce your qualia. So your eyes are detecting different colors of things in the world. They're sending signals to your visual cortex, and presumably there's some system that produces qualia. And it used to produce yellow qualia in response to signals from yellow objects, and red qualia in response to signals from red objects, and so on. But now he's switched over the pathways there, so that now signals from produced by yellow objects produce blue qualia, and signals from red objects produce green qualia, and so on. So he really did invert your qualia. But he might have done something else instead that would have produced much the same effect. He might have left all those mechanisms alone, but tampered with the mechanisms that compare your qualia with remembered qualia. So what you're saying when you wake up is, look, things look different.
Okay, so that's the reference he has. It's the memory, right? But who says the memory is right? Maybe you were born with the wrong kind of, neuroscience in your mind, right? Or right or wrong? Who knows what's right or wrong, right? Everybody is screwed with from the birth. So they think it's correct because they've never experienced anything else. So why just because you have a memory or something? What does that I mean, first of all, a memory is not a qualia, right? A memory is not knowledge. Because there are no qualia in you have memory of the qualia, but that is not the same as saying you have otherwise a photograph of the moon would be the same as the moon, right? That doesn't work, right? You can't say because you have a photograph of something, then you have knowledge of whatever concept that photograph is referring to, right? So now he's going into some, oh yeah, but you have a memory, and I guess you have to trust the memories of colors, and then that would be right. And if all of a sudden changes, right, then the memories are right. No, how do you know? Maybe it has been wrong all the way for 50 years, and then they changed to the right colors, right? What is the comparison? That's why he's manipulating you with, but you have memories and so on, right? So there has to be some kind of reference, some kind of reduction base, some kind of, this is the right one, right? He can never get to that. It will always be sophistry or bad philosophy in some way, based on bad metaphysics.
From yesterday and in the past. Well, so you're comparing your current qualia with qualia from the past. So when you look at Monty here, you're saying he used to look scarlet and now he looks turquoise. That involves a comparison with how he used to look. So suppose what the neurosurgeon had done was interfere with the mechanisms that compare your current qualia with your remembered qualia and switch those around. So he didn't actually change your qualia at all. He changed how you compare your current qualia with your remembered qualia. Now, if you did that, then you'd just think that your qualia had inverted. You'd think that everything looked different from yesterday, even though it actually didn't. So here's how we could illustrate that. So there's the qualia producing mechanisms that produce the qualia, and then there are your reactions to those mechanisms and your memory comparisons. And the question is, did the neurosurgeon make a change here or here? And Dennett's point is this: you, subjectively, can't tell. All you know is things don't seem the same to you. But they would, whether the change were before your qualia or after your qualia. Whether the change was in what qualia were produced in you or in how you reacted to those qualia, in the comparisons that your brain made between those qualia.
I'm trying to get my head around this, right? Also to find the deconstruct and to find errors in it. But if the qualia, you're saying the qualia is produced in me, right? But if they're produced in me, right? If I didn't need the qualia and already knew there's a parrot that should look a certain way out there, why would I need qualia created in me if I already know it? And those qualia could be confused or whatever, right? I just don't get it. So it's like, it's fucking weird, this, right? I have to close this message. So if the qualia is produced in me, I should reject them. Right? So, but I can't experience a parrot then if there's no qualia. And if it's not important whether or not it has this or that color, why are you making an example out of qualia changing? Maybe the whole point is saying it doesn't really matter what color it has, you still know it's Monty the parrot. I don't know. It's just, it's this, he's sort of grooming, this kind of grooming philosophy, right? It's a grooming kind of philosophy. He's manipulating. You're being confused and you're sort of, I can't handle all this stuff. I guess I have to accept it, and sort of, it's so convoluted and sort of walking around the problem and poking at it and poking at you and sort of bringing in all sorts of weird examples and words and terms, and it's like, it's so unnecessarily convoluted and complicated, right? And when something that should be, people can get about most of their day without, driving their cars into trees and so on, right? But understanding the colors and the sounds is so unbelievably complicated for philosophers. They have to talk about it for 10 hours, where they use these qualia to put that argument across, right? It might just, it might just be that you... When simple things like your qualia, like your colors, your sounds, and your taste, and so on, that you use on a regular basis, day after day after day, can't be explained simply and clearly by a philosopher, unless he spends 10 hours and throw words at you, right? Something is wrong, right? I mean, it's like I can't do this, right? Yeah, I'm doing the deconstruction. I'm not saying I'm not going to do that, but I'm not buying this shit, right? You lost me, right? You've lost me from a philosophical standpoint. I have to conclude that you either don't know what you're doing or you're deliberately trying to manipulate me because you need to argue something away. You need to get rid of something or you need to establish something in order for your philosophy to function, right? Otherwise, you won't get your money. You won't get your payment. You won't get your wages, right? And you're not going to live in Crete anymore, right? So you have to buy into this somehow or another. And nobody's going to challenge you because all academic philosophy is screwed from the ground up, right? Nobody in academia had any interest in challenging other philosophers, right? Only if in some kind of superficial level where they can, take a cruise to Greenland or something, or meet on common ground or on neutral ground in a gathering somewhere and discuss things and pretend to be disagreeing and then slapping each other's back and agreeing that they should have their high academic wages in whatever professorship they have, right? So excuse me, screwing around here. Okay, let's hear what the hell he has to say here, right?
And your remembered qualia from the past. All you know is that something has changed.
Okay, let's have this. It's sort of a time. He hasn't defined what time is, right? But of course he can talk about time, no problem. That's a given, right? Qualia production mechanism. Was the change in the qualia production mechanism? Well, what is the qualia production mechanism? I don't know what that is, right? And then there's a qualia. And then there's a qualia reactions and memory comparisons. I don't understand it. I mean, I can't be bothered with this, right? Let's head on. I simply can't get into this sort of handheld weird. Oh man. I don't know what.
So here's how Dennett puts it. On waking and finding your visual world highly anomalous, you should exclaim, you shouldn't say...
No, all you know is that something has changed. Well, qualia is not a thing, is it? Something has changed. I know it's sort of I'm fly fucking the words here. But something has changed. Well, you can't just say something, which if you're just talking about qualia, something, well, what's that? How do you get to that thing that might, if you're not saying qualia, it might something be more than qualia? Because you have to say something. Otherwise, you would need to say the qualia has changed, right? What is that something? So there's something beyond qualia. But how do you get to that beyond qualia? Without using your qualia to get there. Otherwise, you're just conjuring up stuff in your brain and saying, I know this. Right? It has to be anchored in something. And I would say that the qualia. Okay.
Say, my qualia have inverted. You should say something more qualified. Egad, something has happened. Either my qualia have been inverted or my memory-linked qualia reactions have been inverted. I wonder which. Well, you might think that maybe science could help us here by investigating what changes the neuroscience. Tjen actually made? Well, yes, maybe. But as we'll see.
Okay, now he jumped very quickly across this. There's apparently a quote from Dennett. On waking up and finding your visual world highly anomalous. But if you say it's anomalous, how do you know it's anomalous if you have to make the comparison before you can get it to be anomalous? If you don't know if it's this or that version of the new version or the old version or the memories that have been changed or whatever, how do you know it's anomalous? So the choice of words are contradictory, right? You should exclaim eget. Something has happened. Either my qualia have been inverted or my memory link qualia reactions have been inverted. I wonder which. How do you know something is wrong, right? How do you know what you're supposed to be experiencing? How do you know what the quality of your qualia should be? How do you know? Because if you're sort of, there's an old movie where called about Vermeer, about the Dutch painter from 1600 or whatever, right? Which has been turned into a movie with that girl. I remember what's it called, Johansson, Scarlett Johansson, and that British guy playing Vermeer, where she is the servant in the house, and she ends up becoming the portrait of the girl with the pearl earring. But he sort of gives her insights into his painting. And he asks her, okay, look out at the clouds. What color are they? And then she says, they're white. And then he sort of says, keep looking. And then she said, no, they're actually blue. No, I think maybe they're violet. And they're actually slightly green, or they're yellow. So what color are they supposed to be? There is no color that they're supposed to be, right? It's all circumstantial. There's a built-in sort of understanding. This is an object that should have this color. But it's the other way around in your metaphysics. You receive the color, and from that you extract the object, right? At the beginning of consciousness or experience and awareness of experience, there must have been some blemish somewhere in that mind, the first mind in the Cambrian explosion or whatever it was, that had some kind of blemish. And the mind that said, wow, there's a blemish, right? And when that blemish, expanded into a more complicated blemish, then all of a sudden it started to objectify stuff. Because that objectification helped the organism get around. It must have, otherwise it wouldn't be there. They would have died out in evolution, I would think, right? Well, no, this is a theory and so on, right? But you can't put the cart before the horse, right? It's just become so complicated. You've been so used to your memories of stuff, and the parrot should look like that. But the parrot has actually been derived from the qualia. And there's nothing in a qualia that is attached to the object, right? If you're saying that object is out there, you are talking about your references inside, which you are saying those qualia are also out there, right? But they aren't, because the qualia has to be established in you, as you're also saying. And they are not the object. If you say that object is out there, right? The qualia can't be the object. So there's no particular qualia. Qualias are purely produced by your mind, right? So that means your mind is producing qualia. That means there's no qualia that this object should have, right? It depends on whatever your mind creates. that there seems to be something, that we have a memory, seems to point in the direction that there's a sort of a stability to this experience. But it doesn't mean it should be a specific qualia, right? I'm not trying to, remove the reference to qualia. I think it's the most important thing you have, along with your objectifications, like a parrot or something like that. This is what you have to work with, right? But if you say that there's some world out there, whatever you're experiencing is still in you. It's not out there. So you can't say when I experience a parrot, right, I'm still referring to something going on in my mind. And just because I have previously experienced certain qualia or qualities of qualia in connection with that object I have objectified, it doesn't mean that it should have these particular, just because it used to be, doesn't mean that it always have to be and must be, right? There's no reference anywhere that you can hang on to. Your memories are not references you can compare it to, because you're mixing, it's a category error, right? A memory of a color is not a color. Just like a photograph of the moon is not the moon, right? Okay. So far, so good.
Quite so simple as that. So then the moral of this is that knowing your own qualia isn't quite as straightforward as you might think. In fact, in this case, you can't be sure introspectively.
I'm not particularly fond of him using knowing qualia, right? He hasn't established any kind of epistemology here. When you're talking about knowing, you're talking about knowledge. And you need to do some epistemology in order to establish knowledge. You're just throwing around words that have nothing to do in metaphysics. You can't talk about knowing. I mean, you can maybe use the word in some kind of reference, but you can't talk about metaphysical knowledge. It's a contradictory statement. You are mixing, philosophical areas here, right?
Simply by attending to your own experience, whether your qualia have completely inverted or not. That's quite a startling conclusion. Okay, let's move on to another of Dennett's examples. This is perhaps the most famous example
metaphor
from qualia,
of
the coffee
analogy or whatever.
This goes like this. There are two coffee tasters, Chase and Sanborn.
This is also, something I have, spotted when we're dealing with a guy like Bernardo Castro. Whenever he talks about what is going on in the mind out there, in the big world outside his experience, right? Which apparently is also mind. He is always using metaphors. He's talking about ripples or things like that, oceans, or he's not talking about qualia, right? Because he can't experience it. But then he jumps into abstractions. And then these abstractions he can fit in anywhere he wants, right? Like oceans and ripples. These are abstractions. And then he can just, push them into that thing he can't experience. But he's not talking about experiences. He's talking about abstractions. So that's a kind of, sophist leap philosophers use in certain cases, most notably when you're talking about that external world, which I will steadfastly reject that you have any access to, just like Immanuel Kant did.
Their job is to taste the coffee produced by their firm and make sure that it's of a consistent standard. Now, they're no longer enjoying their job. They don't enjoy tasting the coffee anymore. They have agreed that the coffee itself has not changed. They've done a good job in maintaining its standard. The coffee is just the same as it always was. But again, there's been a change in them. However, there are different theories about what this change was. Chase thinks that he has become a more sophisticated coffee drinker. His standards of taste have changed. He no longer appreciates the taste of the coffee in the way that he used to. It's the same taste that the coffee produces, but he no longer likes that taste. Okay, so his theory is this coffee it's producing the same qualia in me, but I no longer react to those qualia in the way that I used to. I no longer appreciate them in the way I used to. I'm a more sophisticated coffee.
Okay, but that's more like my emotional, my desires, my experience. No, not my experience. My liking my experience or not, right? That's not a part of that metaphysics we're dealing here when we're talking about qualia. It doesn't matter whether or not you like your qualia. That's not an aspect of the qualia, whether or not you like your qualia. Liking is the emotional apparatus behind your awareness of those qualia. It doesn't change the movie on the movie screen, whether or not you like the movie, right? It doesn't change the movie. It may change your sort of emotional perception, whatever term, right, of that movie, right? Certainly. I feel the same way. I'm a movie buff, right? But it doesn't change the movie, right? It doesn't say anything about the qualia or whether or not you should trust the qualia based on, what you like about the qualia. I'm sort of, I have my guards up. He's a sophist, right? And he's also these kind of sophists. He think he's very strict and straight and pure kind of philosophy here, right? A sophist who doesn't realize he's a sophist might even be worse than a sophist, right?
Free taster now. Sanborn has a different theory. He thinks that his reactions haven't changed. He doesn't think that he's become a more sophisticated coffee taster. He always liked the taste of this brand of coffee, and he would still like it. The trouble is, the coffee isn't producing that taste in him anymore. Not because the coffee has changed, but because something's gone wrong with his taste mechanisms and his taste processing systems in his brain. The coffee isn't producing the same qualia in him. He wishes it would, because he loves that taste. So he's in the opposite.
No. He's trying to mix what is going on in your emotional apparatus, let us say, right? And mixing that with your experience of the qualia. How do you know that the emotional response you get from experience the qualia is not interfering with how the qualia are? I think it's going for that, right? No, it's a one-way street, right? If you have an experience, then you have an awareness of that experience, but the awareness doesn't influence the experience, right? Otherwise, the awareness would quickly become confused and manipulative, right? And when you have some emotions based on that awareness, that emotion cannot change the awareness, because the awareness needs that in order for there to be emotions, right? So it's a one-way street that way. You can't say, well, what about if the emotion, screws with your experiences, right? Your awareness and your experience. No, I don't believe that's the case, because your mind wouldn't function if you can, screw with everything, right? I think that's what people who are getting drunk or they are taking psychedelia, they want to go the other way, right? They want to have their emotions inflict on their experiences the other way around, right? Maybe I'm I don't know, but it's it's a one-way street, right? If there's an outside, you don't want your awareness to screw with your experience of the outside, the qualia, right? The qualia must dominate the awareness of the qualia, right? Okay, when you're aware of these qualia, one of the things you experience are concepts like parrot and lion and so on, and you have some kind of emotional reaction from that. I'm just calling it, a catch-all term, emotion. They might be very complicated, right? But at least it's some kind of emotional reaction, right? If you see a tiger, you go, oh, right? Something like, if you see a parrot, it's like, wow, look at the colors, right? Oh, that's a nice, cute parrot, right? Something like that. These are emotional responses to your objectifications of your qualia. But you can't go the other way. I can't say, okay, that's a nice parrot, so there's niceness in the parrot, right? No. The niceness is in you, right? So everything from qualia to awareness of qualia to emotional responses to awarenesses is a one-way street. You can't go the other way. Okay.
He claims to be in the opposite position from Chase. He thinks that he's having different qualia, but his reactions to the two qualia are just the same. His reactions to the original qualia would be just the same if he were to have them. Now, Dennett's question here is this. Is there really a difference? These two hypotheses, these two explanations, two theories that Chase and Sanborn have, they seem very different. But are they really different? Can we really pull apart the taste and the reactions to it in the way that both Chase and Sanborn think you can? Now, Dennett...
Yeah, but you're still relying on this reporting, right? He could be fucking lying. You have to talk about your own experiences, mate, right? Why are you trusting somebody reporting something? It's like saying that politicians never lie. You have to work from your own experiences, right? That's why qualia are so important. You can't talk about what other people experience because you have no access to it, right? And why are you talking about pulling apart taste and reactions? But there is no particular action or reaction that needs to follow from some particular qualia or experience, right? There is none. How would you... There might be, but you can't get to it, right? If there is. You can't refute it either. Just because when you see, a cleavage on a woman, you get horny. It doesn't mean that everybody in the world gets horny just because you get horny when you see your wife's cleavage, right? There's nothing that needs to follow from a certain qualia, right? It might generally be the case, but you can't get to some kind of reference that says, okay, it's always this way, right? And you might refer to Hume as his ideas about, causation. That there's nothing that needs to follow. Just because it used to do it doesn't mean that it will always have to. And just because it has been the case, you can't get to some underlying structure that tells you this is supposed to follow from this, right?
It thinks we can't do that. And he points out that if we could distinguish taste and reactions in that way, then there should be three possibilities for each of Chase and Sanborn. Let's take Chase first.
And why are they called Chase and Sanborn? Are those famous coffee tasters or what? It's just sort of... I don't like this kind of goofy, manipulation, right? I don't like that.
Possibility would be that Chase is completely right, that the coffee is producing the same qualia in him, and that his reactions have changed. He has become a more sophisticated...
But he's comparing it to a memory of a taste. Well, yes, it's functional that you know that when it tastes like this, it's possibly coffee. And if it has a strong, additional taste, somebody might be poisoning me, so I'm spitting it out. But that you can't use your memory as a reference to whether or not a qualia is right or not right. That's a category error, in my opinion. It's the same as saying that experiencing the moon is the same as having a photograph of the moon, right? It's not the same. It is not the same, right? It's bad. It's bad philosophy, this.
Sophisticated appreciator of coffee taste. The second is that Chase is quite wrong, that his theory is false, that in fact he hasn't become a more sophisticated coffee taster. deceiving himself on that. It's that the coffee really is producing different qualia in him. So he's actually in the situation, something has gone wrong with his taste buds or his taste processing mechanisms in his brain. So he really is in fact in the position that Sanborn thinks he's in. And a third possibility is that he's half right, that there have been changes on both sides, some changes in the nature of his qualia and some changes in his reactions to them. And then again, for Sanborn, there are three options too. The first is that he's right, that the coffee is producing different qualia in him due to some disturbance to his taste mechanisms. And he's quite right that his reactions haven't changed. The second is that he's wrong, that that his reactions have changed, that his tastes in coffee have changed, despite his thinking they haven't, and that the coffee is producing exactly the same taste qualia that it always did. So he is in the position that Chase thinks he is. And the third, again, is that that he is, again, half right. There's been some change in his qualia and some change in his reaction.
So basically, there's nothing to this. It can be right, it can be wrong, it can be half right, it can be half wrong, whatever, right? Half empty, half full, right? It's like, oh, get the fuck out of my way with this, man. Oh, mixing up emotional reactions to taste and think that that has an influence on whether or not this qualia is... Oh, man. Oh.
Now, again, Dennett's point is that neither Chase nor Sanborn can tell introspectively which of these options is correct. Just by sort of focusing on the experience when they taste the coffee, they can't work out which of these options is right. They can't divide up the process into the pre-reaction part and the post-reaction part. All they know is that they're not enjoying it in the way that they did. Now, you might think that science could help out here, could help to adjudicate between these options. Perhaps neuroscientists could scan Chase and Sanborn's...
But you can't neuroscience your way to whether or not you like something. I mean, what is this? It's so convoluted and complicated, man, right? And science is not a part of metaphysics. You can't use science in metaphysics because you need to establish metaphysics and knowledge in order to get to science. Oh my God. Okay, I think this is the end of this part. Share, like, and subscribe, right? Please, man. You have to hit that subscribe button. Who of you are not pushing the button, right? Come on, you can do it, right? And, I mean, what can I say? It's like, it's annoying kind of philosophy, this. It's sort of droningly slow and boring, right? There's no enthusiasm here, right? There's no passion of any kind, right? I mean, okay, it doesn't have to be passionate, I guess. But if you're doing this for 10 hours or how long this lecture is, lecture series, you have to engage me somehow, and you can't just keep throwing words at me and confusing the terms and saying the photograph of the moon is the same as the moon or something like that. I'm using my own, analogy here, right? It's absolutely boring, right? It's boring. I'm not saying it's necessarily incorrect because it's boring. But it doesn't help me being engaged in your philosophy when it's also all these words thrown at me and terms used left and right and examples and analogies and they're sort of walking around the problem and trying to poke at it, right? Okay, see you in the next one.